Earth entered total lockdown as the Galactic Council deemed humans too dangerous to be allowed free rein in the universe, quarantining the planet under a powerful alien force field and destroying all human spacecraft that tried to leave. Jerry Simpson, a scarred 48-year-old ex-Marine, slammed the throttle of his battered fighter as he desperately weaved through an asteroid field. Alarms blared, smoke filled the cockpit, and sparks flew from damaged instruments as a massive Voth warship closed in, its powerful laser batteries vaporizing asteroids into dust. Jerry clenched his jaw, his calloused hands white-knuckled on the flight stick. His ship rocked violently as he dodged a blast, the hull groaning from the extreme G-forces. He glanced at his sensor array. "Shit, a wormhole?" he said aloud. With no options left, and his damaged ship seconds from destruction, Jerry gunned it and took his chances diving into the swirling, unknown vortex. His ship lurched sickeningly, then stabilized. The screaming alarms and blaring sirens cut out. Jerry's head snapped up as new alerts flashed on his display. He was approaching Earth. "What the hell?" he whispered. This couldn't be right. Earth was sealed off, and there was no sign of the massive Voth blockade or any debris from their battles, but his nav computer was clear. This was Earth in the year 2023. Before the galactic war that forced him to flee began. Jerry didn't have time to process the revelation long, as the battered reactor finally gave out. The ship started breaking apart as it hit atmosphere. Jerry slammed the eject button just before a fireball engulfed the cockpit. His body was crushed into the escape pod seat as he rocketed out, watching his ship explode into a blinding flash. Hours later, Jerry snapped awake, his pod gently bobbing in the Pacific waves. He grinned as a Coast Guard cutter approached. He was home before the war ever started. His elation morphed to confusion as the sailors roughly hauled him aboard, shoving him to the deck at gunpoint. Black-suited agents in full hazmat gear rushed up. The lead agent, a hard-faced man with piercing eyes, grabbed Jerry's flight suit. "You're property of the United States government now." As Jerry was dragged inside, he heard the agent speaking tersely into a radio. "The subject's arrival may have permanently compromised planetary security. Recommend initiating full information suppression protocols." Jerry's blood ran cold as the reality sunk in. By using that wormhole to escape to the past, his very presence may have just doomed humanity to the quarantine and war he had tried so desperately to prevent in the first place. Jerry was manhandled down a maze of grey concrete corridors by stone-faced guards in black tactical gear. His body ached from the crash, his mind reeling from the impossible reality he found himself in. Earth, unravaged by war, before the quarantine. Before the desperate battles that drove him to that fateful wormhole. The guards shoved him into a cramped room, slamming the reinforced door with a resounding clang. Jerry caught himself on a flimsy table bolted to the floor, the room's lone furnishing besides a hard metal chair. Cameras blinked from every corner, and a large one-way mirror dominated one wall. He was in an interrogation cell. Jerry didn't have to wait long before the door swung open again. A hard-eyed man with close-cropped grey hair strode in, flanked by two soldiers gripping assault rifles. The man had a severe face that looked like it had been chiseled from granite. He carried himself with the air of someone used to being obeyed. "I'm Special Agent Gruss," the man said, his voice a rough growl. "You're going to tell me exactly who the hell you are, where you came from, and how you got here." He slammed a thick folder onto the table. Jerry sank into the chair, exhaustion finally catching up to him. "My name is Jerry Simpson. I'm a pilot from Earth, but not this Earth." He met Gruss's piercing stare. "I'm from the future, and you have to listen to me, because we're all in terrible danger." Gruss's eyes narrowed. He flipped open the folder, revealing grainy photos of Jerry's crashed ship. "Start talking." Over the next hour, Jerry laid out everything he could remember. The war with the Voth, the quarantine, the wormhole that somehow flung him into the past. He described the Voth's fearsome technological superiority, the ease with which they crushed Earth's defenses in his timeline, the horrific toll the war had taken. Through it all, Gruss listened intently, his craggy face unreadable. but Jerry could see the gears turning behind those flinty eyes. The agent was putting the pieces together, weighing the implications of this grim warning from the future. Suddenly a klaxon blared through the facility, red lights flashing in the hallway. Gross snatched his radio from his belt. "Report!" he barked. "Sir, we have unknown contacts entering the atmosphere," a panicked voice crackled. "They're not responding to hails. They're heading for New York." "Battle stations. I want eyes on those ships now," Gruss ordered. He turned to the soldiers, jerking his head towards the door. "With me. Level 1 lockdown." As they rushed out, the agent shot a calculating look at Jerry. "Don't go anywhere!" The heavy door clanged shut. Alone, Jerry sprang into action. His gaze darted around the room, looking for anything he could use. The Voth were coming. This Earth wasn't ready. He had to do something. Using techniques drilled into him through countless covert missions during the war, he snapped the flimsy table leg and used the jagged metal to painstakingly saw through the plastic cuffs binding his wrists. Just as he broke free, the door swung open. A young guard entered, looking nervous. "What's going—" Jerry leapt forward, slamming the guard into the wall. A short scuffle later, he was shrugging on the guard's uniform and hat, an assault rifle gripped in his hands. He burst into the corridor, trying to get his bearings in the labyrinthine base. Shouts and pounding boots echoed from all directions as soldiers scrambled to battle stations. Suddenly, the walls shook as a muffled boom sounded from above. The Voth were attacking. Following the flow of rushing troops, Jerry emerged into a cavernous command center dominated by a wall of monitors. What he saw made his blood run cold. A massive Voth battleship hovered over the New York skyline, dwarfing the skyscrapers below. Swarms of attack craft buzzed around it, like angry hornets, as bright blue beams of energy rained down on the city streets. Tanks and soldiers were vaporized instantly by the onslaught, helpless against the aliens' superior technology. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. The command center had fallen deathly silent, everyone staring at the screens in stunned horror. Suddenly the door slammed open. Agent Gruss stormed in, flanked by a squad of black-clad soldiers. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, spotting Jerry instantly. "How did you get out?" Jerry pointed at the screens, his voice urgent. "That's the Voth. The aliens from my time. This is just their vanguard, an invasion force." Gruss followed his gaze, his flinty eyes widening as he took in the horrific scene. He turned back to Jerry. "You know these things. How do we fight them?" "In my time, we never found a way," Jerry said grimly. "They conquered Earth in days, then enslaved humanity. The only way we even slowed them down was by stealing their own ships and weapons to use against them." "Then that's what we'll do," Gruss growled. He glanced at the monitors where Voth landing craft were descending on the burning city. Resolve hardened his features. "We're going to New York. You're going to help us steal one of those ships." As alarms blared and soldiers scrambled around them, Jerry met the agent's eyes, seeing the same desperate determination he'd felt during all those hopeless battles in the future. This Earth still had a chance. They had to take it. "Let's go," Jerry said, gripping his rifle, "before there's no Earth left to save." Jerry crouched low as he led the way through the rubble-strewn streets of New York, his stolen Voth rifle clutched tight to his chest. Behind him, Gruss and a hand-picked team of elite soldiers followed, faces grim and weapons at the ready. The once vibrant city was now a war zone, the towering skyscrapers reduced to hollowed-out husks. Voth ships patrolled the skies, their alien engines emitting a bone-chilling hum. On the ground, the invaders had set up a temporary base of operations, a hive of activity swarming with their soldiers. "That's our target," Jerry whispered, pointing to a heavily fortified structure in the distance. "The Voth's command center." Gruss nodded, his jaw set. "We get in, steal a ship, and get out. No heroics. We stick to the plan." Jerry led them closer, navigating through the shadows. As they approached the base's perimeter, he held up a fist, signaling the team to halt. "Voth patrol, ahead," he hissed. Two Voth soldiers emerged from around a corner. their insectoid faces hidden behind sleek helmets, their clawed hands gripping energy rifles. Before Gruss could react, Jerry was moving. He lunged forward, his stolen rifle spitting blue bolts of energy. The Voth soldiers crumpled, their armor smoking. Gruss raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. Not bad. Jerry just shrugged. I've had practice. They reached the base's walls without further incident. Jerry ran his hands over the sleek metal, searching for the hidden access panel he knew would be there. Got it, he muttered, his fingers flying over the alien controls. With a hiss, a secret door slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor beyond. Voth security protocols, Jerry explained. Learned a few tricks in the war. They slipped inside, the door sealing shut behind them. The corridors were eerily quiet, the only sound the hum of alien machinery. We split up here, Gruss said. Jerry and I will head for the hangar. The rest of you plant the charges and create a diversion. The team nodded, fanning out into the shadows. Jerry and Gruss pressed on, deeper into the heart of the base. Suddenly, a blaring alarm split the air. Shit, we've been made, Gruss cursed. Around the corner, a squad of Voth soldiers appeared, energy rifles blazing. Jerry and Gruss dove for cover, returning fire. The corridor erupted into a storm of crackling energy bolts and sizzling metal. Jerry popped up, sighting down his rifle. His shots were precise, each one finding its mark in a Voth soldier's helmet. Beside him, Gruss fired controlled bursts, his face a mask of concentration. Just like old times, Jerry quipped as he ducked back into cover. You and I remember old times very differently, Gruss grunted. They fought their way forward, Jerry's knowledge of Voth tactics and technology proving invaluable. He hacked door controls, overrode security systems, and led them through maintenance tunnels to flank the enemy positions. At one point, a Voth soldier got the drop on Gruss, his rifle coming to bear on the agent's unprotected back. But Jerry was there, tackling the soldier and wrestling him to the ground. They grappled, clawed hands tearing at Jerry's stolen armor. With a savage twist, Jerry snapped the soldier's neck. Gruss stared at him, something like respect dawning in his eyes. I had that, he said gruffly. Sure you did, Jerry replied, picking up his rifle. They finally reached the hangar, a cavernous space filled with sleek Voth ships. Quickly they boarded the nearest one, a small scout vessel. Jerry slid into the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the controls. Are you sure you can fly this thing? Gruss asked, strapping himself in. Guess we'll find out, Jerry muttered. Suddenly a massive figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a Voth, but unlike any Jerry had ever seen. It towered over them, its armor a glistening black, its eyes glowing a malevolent red. In its hands it held a crackling energy glaive. What the hell is that? Gruss hissed. Trouble, Jerry replied grimly. The warrior charged, moving with blinding speed. It swung its glaive in a sizzling arc, barely missing Jerry's head. He rolled, bringing his rifle up, but the bolts just glanced off the warrior's armor. Beside him, Gruss fired, the shots going wide as the warrior dodged with inhuman agility. It lunged, its glaive slicing through Gruss's rifle like butter, the agent barely avoiding bisection. Jerry leaped, tackling the warrior from behind. They crashed to the deck, grappling furiously. But the warrior was immensely strong, its clawed hands closing around Jerry's throat. Spots danced in Jerry's vision as he scrabbled desperately at the warrior's grip. His hand brushed the ship's control panel. With a last surge of strength, he slammed his fist down on the ignition. The engines roared to life, the sudden blast of heat and force throwing the warrior off balance. Jerry kicked free, gasping for air. Gruss now, he yelled. Gruss, understanding instantly, hit the door controls. The scout ship's hatch slammed closed, the warrior still inside the hangar. Jerry punched the throttle, the ship rocketing out of the hangar in a blaze of blue-white exhaust. Behind them, a massive explosion bloomed, the hangar collapsing in on itself, consumed by flames. As they soared over the burning city, Jerry's heart sank. The devastation was absolute. Buildings lay in ruins, fires raged unchecked, and the streets were choked with rubble, and the bodies of the fallen. Gruss, his face ashen, contacted his superiors. The news was grim. The Voth had established beachheads in every major city across the globe. The world's militaries were in disarray, crumbling under the onslaught of superior alien technology. "They're talking about nukes," Gruss said quietly. "A last resort." "It won't work," Jerry replied, his voice hollow. "In my time they tried that. It only made things worse. The radiation, the nuclear winter. It finished what the Voth started." "What's our play, then?" Gruss asked. Jerry looked up at the sky, at the distant glint of the Voth mothership in orbit. "We take the fight to them," he said grimly. "We use this ship, infiltrate the mothership, and take out their command and control. Cut the head off the snake." Gruss relayed the plan to command. There was a long pause, then, "Do it. Whatever it takes. The fate of the world is in your hands now." As Jerry angled the ship towards the looming bulk of the mothership, he felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. The fate of the world, of the future itself, all rested on this desperate gambit. Beside him, Gruss gripped his weapon, his knuckles white. "Hell of a day," he muttered. "Yeah," Jerry agreed, his eyes fixed on the approaching mothership. "Let's just hope we live to see tomorrow." The captured Voth scout ship sliced through the void, angling towards the looming bulk of the alien mothership. In the cramped cockpit, Jerry gripped the unfamiliar controls, his jaw clenched. Beside him, Gruss checked his weapon for the 100th time. "Coming up on the landing bay," Jerry said, his voice tight. "Get ready." The scout ship glided into the massive hangar, settling amongst the rows of identical craft. Jerry and Gruss slipped out, hugging the shadows. The hangar was cavernous, echoing with the clank of machinery and the guttural voices of Voth technicians. Guided by Jerry's knowledge of Voth ship layouts, they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, ducking patrols and skirting security systems. The ship's interior was a nightmarish blend of organic and mechanical, the walls pulsing with a sickly bioluminescence. As they neared the command center, a faint sound made Jerry pause. Screams, human screams, emanating from a side passage. He exchanged a look with Gruss. They found the holding cells, dozens of humans crammed into filthy cages, their faces gaunt and haunted. Among them was a woman in a tattered lab coat, her eyes sharp and assessing. Dr. Samantha Reeves, xenobiologist. Jerry and Gruss made short work of the locks. As the prisoners stumbled out, Dr. Reeves approached. "I know you," she said to Jerry. "From the future. I've seen you in their databanks." Jerry nodded. "We need your help, Doctor, to stop this invasion." She told them of a weakness she'd discovered, a vulnerability in Voth biology, a way to create a targeted bioweapon. "It's monstrous," Jerry said, bile rising in his throat. "We'd be no better than them." "We're out of options," Gruss countered. "This could save Earth." The decision weighed on Jerry like a physical burden, but as he looked at the faces of the prisoners, the scars of Voth brutality, he knew he'd do anything to prevent the future he'd lived. They split up. Jerry and Dr. Reeves raced to the biolabs while Gruss led the prisoners to sabotage key systems. The labs were a horror show, filled with grotesque experiments, but they had what they needed. As Dr. Reeves worked feverishly to synthesize the bioweapon, Jerry stood guard, his rifle trained on the door. Elsewhere, Gruss and his team planted explosives, working fast and silent. But as they set the final charge, alarms blared to life. They'd been detected. Voth soldiers poured into the corridors, energy weapons blazing. Gruss and the prisoners fought like cornered animals, buying time with blood. In the labs, Jerry's radio crackled with Gruss's voice. "Charge is set. Get to the ship now." Dr. Reeves held up a vial, her face grim. "It's done." They ran, fighting every step, the bioweapon clutched in Jerry's hand like damnation. At the scout ship, Gruss and the survivors were waiting, their faces streaked with sweat and blood. They blasted out of the hangar as the explosives detonated, the shockwave buffeting their tiny ship. Behind them, the mothership reeled, gutted by fire, pulling out of orbit. But as they descended through Earth's atmosphere, their elation turned to ashes. The Voth ground forces were in disarray, but the bioweapon had spread far beyond its intended targets. Humans, too, were falling ill, the contagion uncaring of allegiance. Jerry looked at the vial in his hand, the weight of his choices crushing him. They had won, but the cost. Gruss put a hand on his shoulder, his face as haunted as Jerry felt. We did what we had to, now we need to find a cure. As their ship touched down on the ruined Earth, Jerry knew their fight was far from over. The Voth were beaten, but at what price? The scars of this war would linger long after the last alien ship fell from the sky. Jerry ripped open another antiseptic wipe with his teeth, scrubbing his raw, chapped hands. The sharp scent of alcohol burned his nostrils. His eyes felt gritty, his body leaden with exhaustion. But he couldn't stop. Not when every minute counted. Every test could be the one that saved them all. Across the sterile white lab, Dr. Reeves hunched over a microscope, her dark hair falling in a curtain around her face. She'd barely left her station in days, surviving on a diet of coffee and sheer determination. Gruss burst into the lab, his face haggard. It's getting worse out there, he said, his voice rough. Riots breaking out in major cities. People are scared, desperate. Jerry slammed his fist on the counter, sending vials rattling. We're running out of time, he growled. Gruss dragged a hand over his face. There might be a way to buy some, he said slowly. The Voth's stasis field technology. If we could adapt it, create a quarantine around Earth. Dr. Reeves looked up sharply. You want to cut us off from the rest of the galaxy? If it stops the spread of the bioweapon, gives us a chance to find a cure, it might be our only option, Jerry said grimly. Gruss nodded. I'll make the call. He stepped out, already barking orders into his radio. Hours turned into days as they worked feverishly, modifying the alien technology. Engineers and scientists swarmed the facility, working round the clock. And then it was done. Jerry stood in the control room, Gruss and Dr. Reeves at his side as the stasis field hummed to life. On the screens, a shimmering blue barrier encased the Earth, sealing it off from the universe. God help us, Gruss murmured. Inside the lab, the work continued. Jerry's hands shook as he prepared another sample, his vision blurring. He blinked hard, forcing himself to focus. He had to keep going. He had to find a way. Days bled into weeks. The death toll climbed, the infection raging unchecked. Gruss coordinated with world leaders, trying to maintain some semblance of order, to distribute what meager medical supplies they had. Dr. Reeves worked silently, her face gaunt, eyes haunted. She'd stopped arguing with Jerry, stopped doing anything but working. And then a breakthrough. Jerry stared at the results, hardly daring to breathe. It worked. The formula worked. They had a cure. But the elation was short-lived. When they tested it on the infected Voth prisoners, the side effects became clear. The cure halted the disease, yes, but it also rendered the Voth sterile. Dr. Reeves argued it was a necessary sacrifice, that it was the only way to save both their species. But Jerry felt the weight of his actions crushing him, the implications of what he'd created. They were preparing to mass-produce the cure when the alarms blared. Jerry raced to the windows, his heart in his throat. A Voth ship, hovering just outside the stasis field. They breached the quarantine, Gruss said, his voice numb with shock. The ship landed and a delegation of Voth emerged, their faces unreadable behind their helmets. They had a message, they said, and an offer. In a stark conference room, the Voth laid out their proposal. They had a cure, one without the devastating side effects of Jerry's formula. They would share it with humanity, but at a price. Earth was to remain under the stasis field, quarantined, cut off. The galaxy had learned of humanity's actions, of the bioweapon they'd unleashed. They were frightened, mistrustful. The quarantine was the only way to prevent further conflict, to protect both their species. Jerry felt numb as he listened to the Voth's terms, to accept the cure and the isolation, or to use his own cure and face the consequences of what he'd done. In the end, there was no choice. They agreed to the Voth's deal. The alternative was unthinkable. The cure was distributed. The sick began to heal. But as Jerry watched the Voth ships disappear back into the sky, he felt no victory, only a hollow sense of loss. Earth was safe, humanity would survive, but at what cost? He retreated from the celebrations, from the praise and the condemnation alike. He found himself walking along a beach, the sand cool beneath his bare feet. He looked up at the shimmering dome of the stasis field, now a permanent fixture in the sky. A reminder of what they'd done, of the price they'd paid. The Voth had called it protection, but Jerry knew it for what it was, a prison of their own making. He stood there for a long time, staring up at the sky, the weight of his choices bearing down on him like a physical thing. They had saved humanity, but in doing so they had damned it too. The world would never be the same, and neither would he. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.